Today, it's about discussing how an engineering consultancy serves any customer, basically, and a little brief on the very fundamental basics of any engineering wannabe. So that is a foundation design. I'd like to give a little brief on pictures that we see over here. The one on the right is a picture from a ladle furnace metallurgy system, which basically is a furnace melts metal, and it's a steel manufacturing process where a structural engineer is responsible to provide foundations and supporting systems and utility supports as well for this type of plant requirement. And bottom to that picture is a crushing rod mill, which basically crushes slag or flux or any other sort of material which could be used in any sort of manufacturing process. And again, this type of equipment needs to get supported into a foundation, which also comes into a structural engineer's responsibilities. And on the right-hand side, you see a photograph of a steel bunker being erected in a steel structure, which is supported over concrete base and arrangements. That also, the entirety of it comes under a structural engineer's responsibility. Before winding up this first slide, I'd like to tell you that I come from a background of mainly plant-based engineering consultancy. So I will not be discussing anything on transportations or bridge building or piers and bridges or any other commercial structures such as high-rise buildings or stuff. All right, we'll move on to our next slide. So these are the topics that we're going to cover today. Engineering consultancy, what is it, and how it helps in providing solutions to customers. And second would be the approach to structural engineering. This topic itself is a vast topic. I mean, it could be categorized into different domain of engineering, different domain of structural engineering, basically. But we're going to specify this for today's discussion on how to approach a overall building design and then move on to the foundations of structure. And we'll look into one of the case study that I have had done in my earlier days, and I'll walk you through how a foundation design is done and the checks that we perform during a foundations. All right, so what is engineering consultancy? The first question that comes up to our mind that anybody who is who is going to pass out, all the participants, they want to ask the simple question that which direction of engineering from a structural point of view or from a civil engineer's point of view they want to walk into. I mean, they might be offered into a site-based civil engineering responsibility, or maybe a civil engineering responsibility which handles the site but is being operated from offices. Or another way of engineering is the structural consultancy, basically doing the engineering and producing the drawings. So it says that it's a field of engineering service provided to the customers for civil engineering, civil structural and architectural, along with mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC engineering, who seek to build new establishments. All right, so engineering consultancy companies are looking for customers who wants to develop in more establishments, say for plants or roads or high-rise building or residential buildings or mall or building offices and everything. Everything comes under new establishments. So when the customer comes up and says that I need to develop this area. Engineering consultancy firms provide them solutions based on architectural requirement, civil structural requirement, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and HVAC. You wouldn't be knowing what this HVAC term stands for. Okay, it's heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. That's what it stands for. So the entirety comes as a package to the customer, and the customer would want to see what it's going to cost them. Ultimate desired outcome for consulting engineers or a group of consulting engineers is to come up to a number, a price tag, which the customer would be, informed to, pursue with his new establishment or requirements. So that's what we do. We provide them with solutions on the engineering terms as well as solutions on the financial terms. Coming into the next question, that what are the engineering services provided to the customers? What I have already discussed about the engineering consultancy services are based on departments. We call them CSA, as civil structural architecture, as one group. The MEP, that's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, another group, and the HVACs. So other than that, procurement and project management also comes under engineering consultancy services, which today I'm not going to discuss. But when it comes to a departmental service, that each department, what needs to serve or what needs to produce in front of the customer so that the customer is required information. These basically largely includes these following points, which are a bid proposal, a conceptual design and feasibility studies, and then comes the feed engineering and preparation of estimate, tenders, and bill of quantity, detail for engineering, and fabrication and construction supports. I'm going to explain a little bit on these on these points. So what is a bid proposal? Initially, what happens is that a customer comes up with his very basic, crude idea of what he wants to do. Being an engineering consultant, it is our responsibility to come up with certain solutions, or maybe deriving from our past projects, or coming up with a quick solutions to customers' need and provide them with a standard proposal. Then the customer would compare and tally with the proposals that he'd received from many other engineering consultancy and come to a conclusion of initialization of selection of consultancy services. After that, it comes down to conceptual design and feasibility studies. Now, once the basics of a new establishment is understood and the bid proposal is done, the conceptual design starts. Basically, it's figuring out what sort of structures or what sort of services, utilities are required for the new establishment, and whether it is possible in the desired location, whether you need extra land or you need to acquire an existing location, or these sort of feasibility needs to be discussed over the time with the customer and come to a conclusion of that conceptual design. And once that conceptual finalization has been freezed, although I'd like to add in here that there had been some customers where even on the conceptual designs, many typical, what can I say, superstitious ideas also come into picture. Those sort of things also a engineering consultancy have to take care before providing them with a certain solution. Regardless of that, once the conceptual design is freezed, finalized, then the entire team moves into the feed engineering process. If you could see that the term feed here is made in capital letters, written in capital letters. It means front-end engineering design. So why does it called front-end engineering design? Because this is a type of design which is not entirely detailed, but is done in fair amount of details to come up to a certain cost estimate. All right. So it could be stated that a design which is approximately 70% of its final design output can be called as a front-end engineering design. And that, based on those engineering, you come up to the next stage of this consultancy services, which is basically preparation of estimates, tenders, and bill of quantity. Our entire target is to provide the customer with engineering solution as well as the costing of the project. All right. So we are slowly coming into the costing stage of the project or of this services. So when it comes to preparation of estimate, we do understand that estimate is based out of material costs. So in all the departments that I have mentioned earlier, civil structural, architectural, MEP, and HVAC, all of them will have their list of items that will be included in this entire project. For civil structural, very basic item would be a concreting cost, maybe soil excavation, and then tonnage of steel, or maybe for steel structure, there's a different steel tonnage. For rebar, there will be different tonnage for rebars. And for architectural, similarly, roof sheeting, side girds, and sometimes, the paints and all these other architectural materials such as doors and windows and everything, those come into the costing, the estimate part of the services. Then, as an engineering consultant, we need to be very cautious about what sort of engineering services that an engineering consultant would do themselves, and what sort of services that they would hire from a third party vendor. So generally what happens if a PEB sort of structure is intended for the project? PEB means pre-engineered buildings, where the vendor is required to engineer, design, fabricate, and install a steel type of structure entirely without any main engineering consultants' help. Those sort of services come under the second phase of this point, number D, which is the tenders. You release these tenders to include these sort of third-party vendors. So once these PV vendors come on board, they would require a design for the founding of this superstructure or the steel structure that they could provide us. Although this tender, I have been very specific about a steel structure PEB vendors alone, but these tenders can also be prepared for construction companies who provide construction support, and such as when engineering consultancy services does not include any construction support, we could lease these sort of part of the projects to other vendors who would do the concreting work, do the foundations, and other side grading works. So ultimately, this estimate proposal comes together with a bill of quantity and the tender for the third-party vendors, along with a preliminary set of architectural drawings, which would include mostly the entirety of the project, a basic plan, layout, and sections, and then we would start to get the costing from the third-party vendors, and the final costing would come up and start making some shape to the customer. And moving on to the next end of engineering, which is services, which is the detail engineering. Basically, The detail engineering includes departmental engineering up to IFC standards. IFC means issued for construction standards. Either it's being a steel drawing, or it is a concrete drawing, or it's an architectural drawing, mechanical, electrical, anything. IFC standard means that that's the final product that an engineering consultant releases to the client, and which goes to the site or to the fabricator. Detail engineering involves 100% of final engineering from the conceptual design, from the feed engineering, and after whatever bill of quantity has been set for each area of the establishment. Finally, the other engineering, the last service that we provide is the fabrication and construction support. So as I said, that the detail engineering deliverables, or the drawings, basically, we engineering consultants produce drawings as deliverables and other items as well, but mainly drawings. Those things go to either the construction area or the fabrications. And once it reaches the fabrication shop, further shop drawings, fabrication drawings for each member of steel gets developed, and it gets into fabrication. Otherwise, in construction support, when the IFC drawings, final deliverable drawings, goes into our site, the excavation work starts, the foundation starts, and so forth. In engineering consultancy, there are other services which the customer can request. In a comparison study, retrofitting, as-built engineering, a couple of lines on each of them. Comparison studies is something like a customer requiring costing for two different sort of options or multiple options. This sort of services a customer can come up asking to us. All right. Say example, there would be a solution for a particular structure, which could be a steel building, and reduces the erection time and the construction time, and reduces the foundation size by say 30%. Whereas the same building, if it had been constructed entirely with concrete, and the construction time increases. So ultimately, the customer is looking for the cost difference. This sort of thing comes up from time to time. Retrofitting is something related to existing structures, where you need to retrofit a load-bearing wall, or a beam, or you need to add a beam to something. This entire explanation, what I'm giving you, is based out of structural engineering point of view. So bear with me on that. But retrofitting is basically strengthening your existing structure or making modifications to your existing structure. And as-built engineering is a very interesting aspect of this sort of service, where as an engineering consultant, you would understand that whatever you have shared to the fabrication or the construction site as a drawing, the same thing would want to get built, right? But most of the time, 80% or 70% of the time, it doesn't get happen like that. So, and during the construction process, something or the other gets changed, and ultimately, some part of the structure looks a little different and gets built a little differently. So the customer may come up to you asking for a service where you need to go to the site and make measurements of the existing structure, and come up with a final set of drawings for them for document keeping, in case they want to do some retrofitting in the coming times, and further engineering requirement for those sort of things. That's about it. I mean, for engineering consultancy services. And the budding engineers, the participants over here who wishes to come to engineering consultancy must have certain idea of what is expected out of you. This is what gives you a brief of it.